Okay. And how did you kind of hop into this field?
as an athlete. And it's very common that this story resonates with other coaches. Is I played football actually. I never played basketball. I mean, outside of just for fun. And as a Division II athlete, I realized that to close the gap of the genetic potential that I lacked, I needed to train and train hard. So I fell in love with that process. And
Hmm.
once I graduated and got my degree, and now I'm like, okay, now what do I want to do? I can't play for a living just because I'm not that talented. Coaching was a natural transition from athlete to helping other athletes. Uh,
Okay.
my love for the weight room was developed because I wasn't because I just tried to close the competitive gap, and that naturally transitioned me into the field of coaching.
You're a strength and conditioning trainer, right? But I guess that's
Yeah,
my description of it. What would be your description of like what you kind of do with the
yeah,
athletes day in, day out?
yeah. I mean, tomato, tomato, right? Like context is king when it comes to concepts that we don't really understand from a global perspective. So the phrase strength and conditioning coach is the common phrase that people like myself have been given. But I think
Okay.
that it reduces what we do on a day-to-day basis tremendously, because providing a service of athletic development is so much more than strength and conditioning. So regular folk who don't study the science and don't understand what we do in a global perspective will say, yeah, he's an S&C coach, which I'm fine by. However, if you're asking me to describe what we do, we're more of performance coaches. So what does that
Okay.
mean? That means that you have this umbrella, and underneath the umbrella is performance. Well, what is underneath the umbrella? There's athletic development. What's underneath athletic development? Strength, conditioning, agility, endurance, explosiveness, all of these adjectives that describe what every parent wants their athlete, their kid to be, right? So that's athletic development. Well, what about nutrition? Nutrition is a big part of developing youth, especially youth, right? Because that's when they're most um, susceptible to the power of nutrition. We consult on that. What about health and wellness, sleep consultation? So I think that when you look at the global perspective of who I am as a person and what I provide for people, is we are performance coaches because we look at so much more than just strength and conditioning.
Okay. So there's for years there's like a huge I don't know if it's a myth or whatever it is, but surrounding weightlifting. If we can kind of address it here, like what's the
Yeah,
proper age to begin
yeah,
lifting, touching weights, and does it damage you if you do it too
yeah.
soon, too early? Um,
It's a great question because it's such a an answer that dances around so much, depending on who you ask. But I think the proper answer is it depends on the kid,
okay,
because it takes a certain level of maturity from a child to understand why we're doing these things, these activities, because they don't care if um, picking up this weight is going to make me stronger. They don't care. They don't conceptualize that. They have to understand why picking up this weight makes and getting stronger is going to help me do what.
okay,
So does my child or whoever's in front of me possess the maturity rather, to grasp this concept, right? And then the question of, will strength training damage my child? And the biggest myth that people think about is stunt their growth. So what I'll say
yeah,
to that is, right, that's no, we're not going to let you lift weights. You're gonna stop growing. Your growth plates have too much space between them. You're going to smash the growth plate space. Like I've heard it all, all the answers under the sun. But if you the best way to describe this is, check this out. When you're a kid and you're playing on the playground,
Mm-hmm.
or you're witnessing children play on the playground, the jungle gym, at every park, which is not done enough these days, right? It's kind of died down. There's less kids playing in the park. Are we not witnessing the children jump off of 15-foot slides and land on the ground in a perfect squat, and then they continue playing their game of tag? So then you have to think about, well, what types of forces are these little human bodies absorbing when they do these types of tasks? It's at least 15 times body weight. So if you say, okay, my kid weighs 80 pounds, multiply
Mm-hmm.
that by 15 times, that's going to be beyond any amount of weight that they lift in a gym. Much more. Like, it's not even comparable. So the aspect of, or the concept of, is my kid going to be injured or is their growth going to be stunted based off of them lifting weights? Obviously, we can just look at life the way it's lived in from a children's perspective and understand, like, they're experiencing all of these force absorption moments well beyond any amount of weight that they lift. So now
Okay.
you have to start to ask yourself, well, okay, so they're experiencing these large amounts of force absorptions, but is weightlifting done well? Because when you look at weight training for kids, a lot of times it's just not done well. You see kids holding weights that are much too heavy for them, and they just don't look good moving with weight.
Okay.
So anyone that's been in sport can recognize that right away. Like, that doesn't look good. My kid's squatting right now with that bar on their back. That just looks terrible. It's something about it. I don't know why it doesn't look good, but it just doesn't look good.
Okay.
So obviously, if that's your intuition, the answer is yes, that's probably not good for them, because we can do more harm than good with strength training. So we know that kids are robust enough to accept force, but are they accepting the force with quality shapes, positions, postures, and movement? Right? So I think that a short way to put this is that if you can put a kid in a really good position, load them up with weight that's more challenging than body weight, and they can maintain that position in like an isometric hold, in which we did with your boys we did holds. I
Sure.
said, hold, a med ball and just hold this position for 60 seconds. That is going to have such an amazing and positive impact on their ability to get flexible, their ability to be strong in that position, their understanding of how this type of training can benefit them in their sport. And also, I think because of the idea that kids should play their sport year round, it's another type of movement or training that they're not getting. So it's variety. And I think that that's a huge concept that kids aren't getting enough of, is variety in their movement, in their play, in their sport choice. Like, too many times we just hone in on one sport and we play all year round, which robs them of the richness of movement that most kids when we were growing up would experience.
So do you think it's more beneficial for kids, or as I talk to about basketball athletes, that they perhaps take an off season, or play a secondary sport to work some additional movements and muscles?
Yeah, I think that that's the number one reason why we're experiencing like a huge injury epidemic with kids tearing their ACLs at 12 years old. Like, that's not normal. No kid should blow their knee out at 12, 13, 14. I think the repetitive nature of the same sport year round robs us of the ability to problem solve on the court with movement that you would get from playing other sports or participating in a sound, well-rounded training program.
So then, now as we talk about beginning strength and conditioning for a basketball athlete in particular, what would you
Yeah.
think would be the age in which they should institute some of those movements? And is
Yeah.
it? I'm sure it's not. It's either body weight or bands as they begin. But like, what
Yeah.
would be the?
I can't give a specific age, because remember, all kids mature, from a puberty standpoint, differently. Like some kids hit puberty at 12, some kids hit puberty at 16. Like the range is so huge that I can't say at the age of 10 everyone can start doing some sort of resistance training. It all depends again on, will the athlete, the 12-year-old, the 14-year-old, the 10-year-old, be disciplined and mature enough mentally to be able to hold a wall sit for 45 seconds and not goof around. Because I've owned a gym where we would service a youth group ages 8 to 12. And I've had to tell parents, your kid is not ready to train because they're messing around too much. They're goofing off. They're not paying attention. They're not coachable, which is fine, but it's robbing from the other kids who are ready to train. Right.
So would you, from a body standpoint, right? Say the maturity is there from like at 6, 7, 8 years old. Is the body, because there's still a lack of testosterone, right? Is the body ready to like build muscle and get that type of strength?
Yes. A human organism, doesn't matter what age it is predisposed to adapt to anything. The rate at which they adapt, which means, gain more strength, gain more muscle, whatever the case is different, right? A kid who's past puberty obviously is going to develop faster than a kid who's prepubescent. But their tissue will still adapt and they still will get strong. They'll still get mobile and flexible. They'll still get coordinated. And that's the number one thing that we need to be focusing on as parents, is the coordination of my kid. Can my kid problem solve movement problems on the court in a grass field anywhere? Can my kid figure out how to move their body for a specific movement task from a strategic standpoint? Like that's going to be the number one factor from a kid who can pick up basketball relatively fast versus a kid who just struggles at dribbling. Like it's the soft skills that our kids are lacking that we're trying to figure out on a day-to-day basis. And again, the richness of movement variability, the multiple sports, the exposure to different environments, to different types of sport, contact, non-contact, hitting the ball, tennis, baseball, like all of these different types of skills is going to contribute to just a kinesthetically intelligent child, which means their ability to pick up skills is going to be relatively fast.
All right. So would you the training today, right? Like, so as I grew up, when I was playing, right, not at a high level, crazy low level, but as I would play, or we would lift, right? You would lift. I'm benching. I'm squatting. I'm doing the native movements. Are those the things that we still need to do? So let me ask you this: do you lift or do you train sport specific? Or when you do athletes, or you sport specific? So if I'm having a football play, is it different than my basketball?
Well, yes, absolutely. Because not only within sport to sport, but position to position, especially in football, because it's probably one of the only sports in the world where it's the biggest skill gap from position to position. Not better, higher skill level versus low skill level, because that's not what I mean. I mean, literally each skill is so different. So take, for instance, a defensive end skill set is going to be completely different than a quarterback skill set. You would agree?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, right? Like it's almost a game within a game. Every position in football is a game within a game, and that's why it's such a beautiful game. Positionless basketball is a thing now. Like 1 through 5, almost they all do the same thing for the most part. Like we're not traditional in a sense of like the 5 being, the big and he's limited to these things or she's limited to these things. Like now bigs are not screening and rolling, they're screening and popping. Like it's different. Point being is that yes, we should definitely be training specific to sport and position, but I think that there is a foundational strength and coordination aspect that we all must have as athletes, and that's what the native exercises that you spoke of is that where they come into play, because everyone should know how to squat really well. Everyone should know how to load the hips. We call it a hinge really well. Everyone should be semi-strong on a single leg. The upper body is up for debate. Like, where does a bench press become valuable for a basketball player? I think it does, but where and when? Right? That's a good question.
As they hold their position defensively, as they as they embrace contact on penetration to the hole, I would think
which is debatable as well, because if you think about the concept of a bench press, you're on your back and you're pressing vertically. You'll never be on your back and you'll never be pressing vertically. You know what I mean? So like, and then they also say in football, if you're on your back pressing vertically, that means you probably got beat bad, right? So, you know, like the argument that I like to pose for people who want to bench press a lot is that if you're trying to gain mass in your upper body from I want to embrace contact and weaponize contact a little bit more because you can weaponize contact, I would give you that. Yeah, that's a really good means of gaining mass up here. No question about it. But I also would say that careful of overdoing bench press. Number one, you can create imbalances in your upper body, meaning your posture gets really bad because your shoulders are so developed and your chest is so developed, which will affect your ability to get your hands up over your head. And then number two is it just there's a ceiling of good for the bench press. There's a ceiling to it. Like there, at what point is being strong in the bench press a waste of time when you can do other things that will actually help you be a better basketball player? So, you know, again, it's a very agile concept to break down, like what's good and what's not good, what makes sense. But
so you would, if I had to ask you, you would prioritize lower body strength over upper body strength if I'm training for the sport of basketball and strength?
I think that if there were an order of operations, I would definitely look at the lower body first and then get to the upper body secondarily. But also, let's say all the all grounds are even for a child. The answer is yes. Do you need to have a degree of upper body strength? Of course you do, but you're going to feel the benefits of training quicker through lower body training than versus upper body training.
Okay. And
it's a tangible transition, right? Like if I'm getting stronger in my lower body, I'm going to feel bouncier. I'm going to feel more stable. I'm going to feel like I can change direction better versus if I get stronger in my upper body, where is that going to show up in basketball?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like where am I going to feel that?
Yeah. And I guess, would you also agree that, especially with the training, like, so let's talk about your in particular training style and your methodology. Like, so you deal with a bunch of NBA guys. Is it NFL as well or just NBA?
NBA.
Okay. So you deal with a bunch of NFL guys. What are the muscles that you're focusing on or the movements that you're focusing on because they're high level basketball athletes?
It's not that linear. Like the question that you ask, there's no answer to it because it depends on who I'm training, right? We talked about it earlier, like Fred VanVleet skill set as a point guard is completely different than Drew Holiday's skill set as a point guard. They play completely different. They play the same position. So Why wouldn't you train them the same, Mike G? No, because they're completely different play styles, body shapes, athletic levels, skill levels. Like it's so much more diverse of a thought than just saying, you know what, this is how I train NBA basketball players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly get it. Yeah, they just
Give you a foundational view of how, like, my philosophy of training for NBA basketball players is it's a movement based approach. That's the best way I can umbrella like our training model. Movement first. So I don't care how much you can squat, I don't care how much you can bench press, I don't care how much you can deadlift, and I just name these exercises because that's what a lot of people focus on. I care more about how well you move than anything, and then we reinforce that movement with strength.
okay. And I guess, and you look at maybe film, or you just working them out to see maybe what deficiencies in their movement that they may have, and I got to focus on this particular area.
Correct. And just talking to them too, like, hey Drew, what do you want to work on? Or hey Fred, where do you lack that you want to be better at?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because the athlete's going to know better than anybody. To ask a kid that, probably not. They're all going to say the same thing. I want to jump higher. So no good in asking them that. But at that level, they know what they want. They know what they need.
And so let's just talk about at a base level, the jumping higher thing you just, as you mentioned, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the movements that involve that I've got to get stronger in these areas to be able to jump higher?
Well, if we're talking about kids, you have to jump maximally. So how do I get kids to jump maximally with maximum intent safely, as well as in a dosage that's not going to be too much? That's the problem with AAU, especially for our kids. They're just playing so much that they're never touching maximums because their bodies are so fatigued.
Okay.
So if I train, if I have a kid that's training twice a week, once a week, whatever it is, practicing 3 times a week, and playing, you know, 5 to 8 games a week or whatever it is, that's just a lot of load. That's not healthy for anybody, in my opinion. So when am I going to get maximal efforts in the endeavor of becoming a higher jumper? It's very rare, right? Because I'm always at this level of fatigue. Whereas if I
Okay.
say, okay, I don't know how this would be structured, but let's only play 2 games a week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's only practice twice a week, and let's train twice a week. Now the body has enough energy resource to actually express maximal output to get closer to the goal of jumping higher. If I'm always operating in a state of fatigue, how can I ever push that envelope? Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, for sure. And but aren't the main, like I've got to deal with some main muscles to be able to even reach that maximum, right? Is it like
Yeah, that's
quad?
but well, yeah. I mean, if that's what you're asking, like what muscles, which movement should I be doing to jump higher? Yes, you should be squatting. You should be jumping. You should be doing plyo boxes. You should be doing jumping rope. You should. I mean, again, that question is such a hard question to answer. In one answer, because it's a variety of things. But I
Mm-hmm.
think where parents miss the mark is they don't understand that there is a such thing called too much.
Okay.
That's just the truth. Like, doing all this stuff is too much sometimes, and I don't know why people don't get that.
So in a perfect world, then, if you had your druthers, how many times a week would you have the athlete do strength training?
Yeah,
If they're still,
if the kid was bought in, and they had a schedule that allowed them to rest two to
Mhm.
three times a week, is beautiful. But again, if I'm going to train 3 times a week, that means my practicing and my playing has to inversely
Come
have a
down.
relationship, right? Yeah, go down. Exactly. So what's my priority based off of the competitive season? if I'm playing a lot, whatever a lot is, I don't understand the schedule of AAU. Like I've never been a part of that, so I can't speak intelligently about it. But if I'm playing a lot, 2 to 3 times a week, that means my training has to be down. If I'm not playing as much, that means I can train a lot. Like it has to be inverse.
But when you say train a lot, is it just that I'm doing a singular thing on one day? Like, can I go shoot some shots, but then still get some strength and conditioning in?
This is a beautiful question because that's the point that I'm trying to make is people think that getting on the court and, getting up 200 shots and maybe doing some finishes and maybe playing a little bit of ones. I didn't play Mike G. I just did this little workout, but that's still low. Those little moments accumulate, right? Like, and now, like, why am I getting stress fractures in my shins? Why is my kid getting a stress fracture in their foot? Like all these little injuries that kids should never have start to pop up because they don't think that those little court workouts aren't intense enough to do damage, but they are. If you do them all the time, some kids work out 2 times a week or 2 times a day on court. That's a lot of load. Mm-hmm. But when you think about, go ahead.
No, so you're more, so anytime there's load on the body, you consider that a workout and you don't want, so if I have 7 days of consecutive load, no matter what it is, that's way too much, right? So then,
yes.
What's the ideal amount of days? And I know every individual athlete, so you can't generalize and say, this is it, right? But if we're just going with the average, by average athlete, is 5 days, 4 days of load max is what you're like?
I would say I wouldn't look at it like that. I would say 2 on, 1 off. Live by that rule. I don't know if it's possible, but 2 days in a row of court load and whatever else that you're doing, but then that third day completely off. And if you have to go on court to shoot, it's just spots, literally catch and shoot. That's it.
Okay.
And then you can go 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. Does that fit the AAU schedule? I have no idea, but that's
they tend to practice maybe like 2 or 3 days a week, but then the weekends are loaded with games. So you may have 4 or 5 games in a weekend, just depending on how good the team is, right? How far you go on the pools or brackets. So it varies per team, and then the level, like the skill level, also varies in terms of what they're doing. And also, then the high school.
Let me ask you a question about the food that's served at these AAU tournaments. How are these kids eating in between games?
It's all bad.
So I'm a firm believer that food can help you recover or actually rob you from recovery, like take away from recovery. And if the food is bad, air quotes, because how do you define that? We won't get into that too deeply. If the food is bad, nachos, whatever it is, hot dogs, whatever.
French fries, it's fried food with a bunch of carbs.
You're robbing from recovery. So now you're digging deeper into the hole of stress.
Okay.
So that's kind of like how I look at it. And nobody's wrong for it. Like this is just what it is. But understanding this though, right? Like let's not turn a blind eye to the fact that if I give my kid nachos, soda, and a hot dog in between games, that's not going to be a bad choice.
Got you. And so you touched on it a couple of times. You touched on recovery. So, hold on one second.
And just respectfully, I have about 7 more minutes.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, we'll knock it out.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
How are your boys doing, by the way?
They're doing well. Yeah, they're doing well.
They're like 15 now, 16 now, right?
16, yes, 16.
Crazy. Anyway, sorry.
All right, so let's just touch on recovery really quick.
Sure.
So in this day and age, you got the little guns, you got the little legs that people put on, you get the cryo. So how important is that to athletes, whether young or high school? Like, how important is that?
Let me just give you food for application right now. The gun, the percussion gun, Theragun, Hypervolt, whatever you want to buy, extremely beneficial for in between games. I would recommend that to every single parent that's taking their kids and they're playing 4 or 5 games in a day. Doing the Hypervolt on the bottom of the feet, on the quads, on the hamstrings, on the calves after every single game, spending that 10-minute session, it will drastically improve their recovery time in between games.
And why is that?
Blood flow.
Blood flow. Okay.
Blood flow. It's like a cool down massage session. You're getting the stagnant old blood to circulate up the body. You're just getting new blood into the system, and blood is the transport of nutrition to the working fatigued muscles. So we want to replenish, which is why nutrition is important, right? So we want to replenish those fatigued muscles with new blood, and that percussion will help with the blood flow situation.
The same instance with the little legs they put on.
Yeah, as far as the Normatec, the boots, the recovery boots, same idea. It's passive, meaning you don't have to have someone do it on you. You could just put the boots on and set it and forget it and get on your phone or chill or whatever. More pricey, obviously going to be more expensive, but definitely beneficial as well. Like, it's been proven in science that it will help with blood circulation. Same thing. It's all circulatory recovery.
Okay. So if there's anything that, right, because we only have a bit of time, is there anything that you can give to the athletes in terms of, right, like strength and conditioning, or things that they should, because why do we even need it, right? Like, do you think it's imperative that the younger athletes, or like, I'm talking about like the elite level, middle school, high school, like, is strength training even imperative?
Yeah, I definitely think that the more an athlete is exposed to good quality strength training, they're going to be put in positions and postures that will not only help them be better on the court from a strength perspective, they'll be able to absorb contact and not get pushed off of a spot, or during defense, when you're guarding the post, you'll be able to wall up a little bit more secure and stable. Strength training will help you with that. It's whoever wants to debate that is okay. That's going to be an interesting debate. But not only the performance piece, but the injury piece, because smart strength training is going to drastically reduce the chance of injury, because you're going to train the muscles and all the tissues in lengths and positions that are generally the areas of injury.
Okay.
So if you can expose your kid to positions that often cause injury and get strong there, the likelihood of you experiencing an injury is less. It's just that simple. If I am more stable on a single leg, studies show ankle sprains are drastically reduced.
Okay.
What's the number one injury in basketball?
Ankle sprain, for sure. Yeah.
Am I saying you will not get an ankle sprain? Absolutely not. You step on somebody's foot, strength training will not help you with there. But where strength training will help you is when you do step on that foot and you do roll your ankle, maybe the ankle sprain is less severe. Maybe you recover from that ankle sprain faster. So it's a no-brainer that strength training, good quality strength training, will help the athletes be better on court. But what is good, healthy strength training? That's the number one answer.
Okay.
Because
And then,
just like doctors, there's good doctors and there's bad doctors. There's good trainers and bad trainers.
A final question would be, what about supplements like creatine or protein powder or things of that nature?
Great question. Love that question because we get scared of supplements. We're like, oh man, this. I'm too young for this. Just to put it to bed, let's wait for creatine until after puberty,
Okay.
whatever age that is for your kid. But protein, please invest in a good protein powder. And I don't get paid from these people. Momentous makes an amazing protein powder. Momentous. Don't ask me to spell it.
Yeah,
Momentous.
I'll take
I
care of
just
that.
think that they're amazing. Kachava, amazing protein powder. And I think that most kids don't get enough protein. And an easy way to get more protein in their body, protein smoothies. So
Okay.
please invest in a good protein powder every day. I think we talked about that with your boys for sure.
Yeah, it's just tough getting them. I'm always, um, I'm always the one pushing it, saying, "Man, get your shake, right? Grab it in the morning before you, or get your." But they think it now. They see it as like, well, it's just like a teenager thing. Like you telling them to do something, so now they don't want to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's something that they can maybe take in that didn't feel so much like a protein shake. It was just like drinking a soda to them, but we
yeah,
still go up and down in terms of, but we're not consistent. I try to get them on it, but they're just, yeah, they are who they are. I'm just trying
yeah.
to.
And that's the rigors of parenting that I feel like, is a whole nother can of worms and conversation. But
Yeah.
if in a perfect world, if every kid is drinking protein every day, post workout, post court, post game, you're gonna recover faster. It's that simple. It's the
And even
science.
on workout or non-load days, still having
Absolutely.
one of those. Okay.
Yeah, just because we know that kids' diets aren't complete. They just aren't. And that's an easy way to get some quality nutrition into the system.
Got you. Okay. No, so I think I got what I need. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah,
And
man. I like to help. I like to, do these types of things. I hope I wasn't too wordy or too sciencey for people to understand, but
no,
let me know how else we can, help. And
all right, appreciate it, Coach. Take it easy.
thanks, Rick.
All
Appreciate it.
right. Yep.